Good morning, STAR students. Professor Phil here, and welcome to session 1 of Video Production 1. We're going to start off by taking a little tour of the Mac Finder interface, where you should be able to see all of your sessions. You should have these folders. Each of these folders will have the raw materials, the assets that you're going to need at least to have pre-produced for your classes, and then in some of the sessions you'll be going out and shooting and bringing them back and capturing the video and audio, or whatever we need for the assignment that you're going to be working on. But in the first session we have the golfer, and we have 3 different pre-produced assets for you. We'll talk about these a little bit more when we get into the assignment itself, so I don't want to get into that yet. I don't want to take the time. Anyhow, so if you're registered and you got all your assets, then you can go forward. If you haven't got these folders already, then you need to make sure that you've got those, because we can't go forward without those. Okay, get started now on the first assignment, and that is the golfer. Okay, so as I showed you before, we've got these pre-produced assets for the video, and then we've got some sound effects for the audio. First, let's open up Adobe Premiere. Now I'm working on a MacBook Pro. Some of you might be working on Windows, and that's perfectly fine. The interface is almost identical. So first of all, we need to go down to the dock, and wherever you have it available, your application on Windows or on Mac, or you can go into Applications and scroll down to Adobe Premiere Pro, and then the app would be inside of that folder right here. And you can either double click it there to open it up, or you can simply drag this down into the dock so you'll have it for quick reference and opening later on. I'm not going to drop it now because I've already got it there, and that would be so wrong. Okay, so we have Adobe Premiere opened. When you open it up, you'll see you have your start window, and if you're starting a new project, then of course you want to click there. If you're opening up a project, which you might be doing with our assignment 1, then click on that. But we're going to start from the very beginning and click on New Project. Okay, then you get the New Project window dialog box, and you'll see under the name at the very top it says Untitled. That's the default. So we're going to rename this to Golfer. Okay, and then last name. My name is Snyder, so I'm going to put that in there. So you go ahead and put your last name in there, and we need to set the location for this. So you want to click on the Browse button, and then do a navigation into the folder where your golfer assignment is. And so you'll want to go into session 1, which you should have already. Click on that, and then click on the golfer folder, and you'll be saving this project file. It's a Premiere Pro project file into the golfer folder. So you go down here and click choose, and that will save it in there. And then everything that you do in that project will be saved into that folder. And then it'll take you back to the new project window. Go down and click OK, or you can just hit return. All right, and then you've got the interface, and you can see up here at the top where it says it has the path from users, and then your name, and desktop, and golfer, and then Golfer Snyder Premiere Pro project, or Premiere Project for short. Okay, now here on the interface, I'm going to take you on a little tour. Okay, first of all, let's go to the window. Go to the very top menu for Premiere Pro window. Okay, and this window is a drop-down menu, so click on that, and then the very first one in the drop-down is Workspaces. We want to make sure that you're on the editing workspace. Okay, these are other specialized user interfaces that we won't be using right now, but we want to make sure, like I said, that you're on the editing interface. Okay, so click on that, and then it should look like this. You've got a source monitor, which is what this is. We have several tabs here: effect controls, audio, clip mixer, metadata. There's no data in there in any of these because we don't have any assets imported yet. Okay, so we're going to start with the source monitor. The source monitor shows you what the visuals look like before you've added them into the timeline, and we'll talk about the timeline too. And over here on the right, we have the program monitor. That shows you what your video looks like after you've added the effects or titles and any other things that you might add to it. Okay, and notice when I mouse over the division line between these two that I get these two vertical parallel lines along with the arrows going either way. That gives you the ability to size windows, and the same goes for up and down. So you got vertical and horizontal sizing going on here, and that is available all over the place in here, so you can squeeze these together and give you more room. This down here is the timeline, as you can see, and we haven't added a sequence yet, so that's why it says there, and there's nothing here. So you can see drop media here to create a sequence, and we will do that in just a few minutes. This is your playhead position here, and you can see that I'm getting little pop-ups that are hints and little helps for knowing what you're doing and where you're doing it. All right, and then over here on the left we have another window. Let me size this out just a little bit so you can see we have other tabs as well on here. We're going to start off with the project tab. This is the project window, and this shows you what assets that you have in the project, whether they're in the timeline or not. Okay, and then you have your media browser. That's a way that you can navigate to get the media from inside the program. And your effects, we're going to use this just a little bit in this tutorial. Okay, so that's the quick tour of the interface. These are some tools that we'll be using. We won't be using all of them right now, but as we go through the course, we'll be adding to our knowledge and skill in using those. Okay, so at this point, let's go ahead and start working on the project. We've already got the project named. It's Golfer. And as you'll find out as we go through these tutorials and all the different sessions here, we have lots of different ways to do lots of different things. I'm going to do the most basic versions of the operations, but I'm going to show you at least one or two other ways of doing them. Usually that has to do with shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts, just rather than wearing your hands out and getting repetitive stress syndrome or carpal tunnel syndrome from using your mouse too much, which can happen. Oops, somebody just texted me. How nice of them. Then I'm going to give you shortcuts so you can just press a single key or a couple of keys together and do the same thing with your left hand. And again, it's if you're going to be spending a lot of hours doing this, you want to try to have as little stress on your hands and wrists and fingers and back and neck as possible. So first of all, let's go ahead and import the assets that we're going to be using for the Golfer. So you go up to the File drop-down menu, then go down to Import. The shortcut, as you can see, is Command I. So you can just also hold down the Command button and click on I. So let's do that. Import, and since we saved into that window, we're already right here in the Golfer window. Okay, so we want to bring in the assets, but we don't want to import the project itself. Okay, that's our project icon and the project itself. So we don't want to import it into itself because that's what we would be doing. So we want to first import click on the close-up, CU, that's what CU stands for. And this suffix here is the file type. It's MPEG-4. So that's a type of compression. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. And then hold down the Command button on or the Control button on Windows, and then click on the next one, which is a medium shot, and then click on the folder that has the sound effects in it, and then on the wide shot. So these should all be selected, and then you go down here and click import. So this is what your interface should look like once you've imported the assets. You've got the close-up here, the little thumbnail, and you've got the medium shot, and then you've got the wide shot. And then you have a folder which contains the sound effects. Now, in Premiere and any other editing program, when you've got a folder like this, it's no longer really called a folder, it's called a bin. And that term comes from the film business when they would put clips or various shots into a literal bin, and they would hang there, or they would just be draped across the edge of the bin, and they would go to them and pull them out and edit them together on the Moviola or whatever editing platform that they were using with the celluloid. So anyway, that's just a little tidbit. And when you want to create a new bin, you go down here to this folder here, and it's creating a new bin. Okay, and that's what you see down there below. Okay, so at this point, you can also double click on each of these assets and open them up. Then you have your different sound effects in here. You got close, close 1, close 2, footsteps. So different sound effects that we're going to be listening to, and you can add some or not, depending on what you want to do. I'm going to leave you some freedom in how you want to put those sound effects in. All right, and then to close that, we just click the red X button, or we can just minimize it. And so you can see as you mouse over each of these thumbnails, it shuttles you through the video. Now, when we double click on each of these, then it brings it into the preview monitor or the source monitor. So we have the close-up there, we have the medium shot, and then we have the wide shot. And you can shuttle through it by clicking on the playhead. That's what that little blue thing is, the playhead. And then you can see right here is the time code on each of these. They don't start at 0, but it does show you the time. Over here on the lower right, you can see that is the duration of the clip. So that would be 8 seconds and 2 frames in length. So on this side, you see as we scroll through, or we shuttle through, you've got the seconds here and the number of frames. It's 30 frames per second, and this would be the minutes and then the hours. If you've got a lot of footage, then you normally what they'll do is they'll have this, they'll start each different tape at 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. So they're divided or set up separately and designated by different hours of tape. Okay? Now let's go ahead and create a timeline sequence. So I'm going to mouse over this and scoot these over. I want my timeline. This is the timeline area. As you can see, timeline. And I want this to be nice and long, so I have a lot of latitude for scrolling back and forth. So I've moved this over just about as far as I can at this point, and shrunk those thumbnails down. So let's start off with the wide shot. And normally when you're doing, and this is kind of the part of the theory of editing aesthetics, is that you want to start off with a wide shot, kind of establishing shot, and we'll talk more about that later on in this tutorial, and then go to a medium, and then to a close-up shot. And it doesn't necessarily have to be done that way. That's kind of a convention that's been established over the years, and so again, you don't have to do that, but it's always good to learn the rules first in any discipline, and then you can break the rules later on. So we're going to start off with a kind of a standard conventional way of editing, and we'll start off with the wide shot. Okay, so now you can see here You have choices of different buttons of ways to bring it into the timeline. So you have where you can just take the video in, and none of these have audio, so we're just going to worry about the video. This is for dragging the audio only, and then you have the insert button here, which puts it in between clips. We don't have any clips in there, so we're not going to do that. But when it does, it shoves the clips in the timeline down that you're putting it in between. And again, we'll talk more about that later. I don't want to put too much on you at this point. And this is the overwrite button. So what this does is it just lays it down wherever you have the playhead. Of course, there is no playhead in the timeline yet, but we will have one as soon as we start a sequence. So I hope that that's not too much for you right now, and you can rewind and listen to it over again to get some of this nomenclature. It's really important that you learn the terms in this tutorial and for future use. First of all, we need to create a sequence. And what you do is you go to the File menu, go to New, go over to the right and click Sequence. The shortcut for that is Command-N. So that opens up the New Sequence dialog box, and in there we can choose what we want to do. Since this is not a real high resolution video, and I like to keep the file size small for these assignments so that they're easier to send over the internet. Let's go with HDV 720p. Okay, so what you do is you scroll down to the HDV folder here, and then click on the triangle. That opens up that folder, and let's go down to the very bottom of that folder and choose HDV 720p 30. And so that's high definition video, and that's 720 pixels. Okay, and that's the P stands for progressive, so it's not interlaced. And again, in the lecture I'll talk more about that. And then that's 30 frames per second. So once you've selected that, then you can either double click on it or click on OK. All right, and now we have a timeline, so you can see the time going across in progression from 0 to 16 seconds and so on. This particular exercise we're doing is only going to be about 20 seconds long or so. Let's go ahead and we can do it one of two ways. Like I said, you can do a lot of these things in different ways. We can drag the whole thing, just clicking on it and dragging it into the timeline, let it snap over to the left, and then there it is. Okay, and now you see it's in the program monitor. Also, make sure that over here in this section, you have all three of these things are blue. If they're ghosted like that or grayed, then you won't be getting the properties. That we want that snap property in there so that we can easily snap to the beginning and end of the timeline's assets. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this. So you mouse over the clip that's in the timeline, mouse over to the left of it, and you get these two horizontal lines with the vertical arrows. And once you got that, then click and drag it up. And what that does is that gives you a little thumbnail inside of the timeline. And then we do the same thing for the audio, but since this doesn't have audio, we're going to just delete that, okay? Because we don't need that there. We're going to have sound effects, and other times in other exercises we'll put music or we'll put narration. So to delete that, we click on this little lock. See this little lock over here, toggle track lock? Because anytime we select this to delete it, it's going to delete the video too, and we don't want to do that. So click on this lock, and then you select the audio, and then just press the delete button. Okay, simple. All right, and then we can unlock it. Now we can't really see this very well, so we need to expand it. There's different ways to do that. The easiest, quickest way to learn is to go down here to the slider. This is a slider which slides you through, navigates you through the timeline. And it starts out pretty much expanded out. So we're going to zoom in on it. That's literally what we're doing, is zooming in on the clip. So go to the far right end of this slider and then click on it and drag it. And that, in effect, zooms in on the clip so you can see the clip and the thumbnail a lot better. Another way to do that is just press the Z key, and that brings up this little plus icon, magnifying glass, and you click on it and it zooms in. You can also zoom back out. So by clicking on the end of this slider, you can zoom back out. You can make it smaller. But by the same token, if you click on the zoom tool, or again, you can click on the Z, which is the shortcut on the keyboard, you can press the plus key or the minus key on your keyboard to zoom in or out real quick. So that's minus and that's plus on the keyboard. All right, so back to the select tool, and I'm going to show you another way also to create a sequence. So suppose, let's go back and undo all the stuff that we did, okay, before we had even a sequence. And the way I did that was I pressed Command Z, that's to undo. Like in just about any other program. In Mac it's Command Z, or in Windows it's Control Z. So we're back to where we were before we created a timeline, no sequences, and we can create a sequence automatically by simply dragging and dropping the video into the timeline. So I'm going to show you two different ways to do that. So you'll have three ways of doing that. You can either do it like we did originally with File, New, Sequence, or you can simply click on the video clip and drag it into the timeline, and it creates a new sequence. I'm going to undo that, Command Z, and Command Z again to go back to no sequences. And since I know that there's no audio, I might want to just drag the video only. As I showed you a little bit earlier, go over this film clip icon. You get the hand for the cursor and click on that and then drag it straight down. And if you have a clip that has an audio file attached to the video and you don't want the audio, or there's nothing in the audio, like is in this case, then you might want to do that to save yourself a couple of steps. So we're going to zoom in on that. So press the Z key and then click on it, and that zooms in. Or like we did before, you can press the plus key on the keyboard and zoom in on it. Okay, so now you know you have a couple of different ways of doing that. Starting a sequence and at the same time bringing the clip down into the timeline. Now at this point, we're going to click on the playhead and drag it through, and you can watch the video play depending on how fast you're shuttling through the timeline. And you can see up here that you can do the same thing and click on this playhead and move it through the program monitor. Back and forth. And you can use the playhead position to decide where you're going to start and where you're going to stop in your clip. If you're going to do an edit, if you're going to say come out of this shot before he swings, which is what we're going to do, then you would just cut at that point. All right, now we're going to do our first edit. We're going to start out clicking on the playhead and shuttle it forward to just before he starts his backswing, right about there. Okay, and I have that at 1 second and 3 frames, so not very long. And this shot is also done in slow motion too. Very simply, what you can do is press the C key on the keyboard, and that brings up the razor, the blade tool. Okay, and you can see over here in the toolbox that that's the one that's selected now. That's the razor tool, but the shortcut is C, presumably because it means cut. So take the blade and put it right about where it is, and it'll find the playhead position, and then just click it. So you don't have to worry about being perfectly exact, because it'll find it. And then once you do that, press the V key or take the select tool and select the rest of the clip and hit delete. Hit the delete button. It doesn't delete the clip itself. You've still got the whole thing in your assets folder, and it's also here available as a thumbnail for your use, because we're going to come back to that. What we want to do is cut to the medium shot here, as I mentioned earlier, and then the tight shot. And they'll all be pretty much the same position that he's in now, because part of the theory of editing is continuity. And we're going to start off trying to make this look seamlessly cut from the wide shot to the medium shot and then to the tight shot, and without even having to think about that's what's happening. Let's double click on the medium shot, and you probably just saw what I did was I scrolled up. Because we've got this squished over to the side here, you have to scroll up. So simply scroll up and double click on the medium shot, and we can click on the playhead and drag it to the beginning there and drag it through and see how it plays all the way through to the end. Okay, so we're going to start this right at the beginning. That'll be our end point, is at the beginning, and then shuttle through. Let's let him do his little neck stretch and little blow thing, and then look back down. So we want to take it just to where he's looking at his target, which might be his wife's favorite glass vase, so let's hope not. All right, so here we are at the out point for this clip, and you can see I'm at 10:17. So anywhere right around there, 10:16, 10:17. And you can also type that in. So let's say we had trouble finding exactly. You can just go in there and type 17 or type 16, and it'll go to that point in the clip. So I'm going to make that 10:17. And that's where we're at. Okay, and that'll be our out point. So we want to make that our out point. And again, there are a couple ways of doing that. We can go down here and click Mark Out. Okay, but the shortcut for that, when you mouse over there, you see the shortcut is O. So we'll do that next time. Now for now, let's go ahead and let's drag that, the video only, drag it down and let it snap right into position next to the first clip, the wide shot. And then we can just shuttle through that and see the cut. Looks pretty nice. Looks pretty seamless. Looks like we have good continuity because he's looking in the same direction, and his arms and his body are in the same direction, but now he does a little bit of action there with the neck stretch and looking at his target. Okay, next we're going to cut to the tight shot, the close-up. Let's go to the very end. We can go quickly to any place we want by using the keyboard arrow keys down in the lower right of your keyboard. Arrow up takes you earlier in the timeline, and arrow down takes you later in the timeline to the end. Okay, and then you can also do left and right arrows. They take you one frame at a time to the right or one frame at a time to the left. So let's arrow down to take us to the very last frame of the sequence. And we're going to add the close-up. And again, remember we've got him in this position with his head looking down, addressing the ball, as they say in golf, and his arms are down and in the same position. He hasn't swung yet. So let's double click on the close-up to bring it into the source monitor, and let's shuttle through it and take a look at it. All right, so he does his neck stretch thing. Let's start this off at the very beginning also, because he's looking down. That's what we want. He looks down again, but that's right when he's swinging. We don't want him to swing yet. So go to the very beginning, and in this particular case, it's at 0, 0, 0. So it's at the very first frame. And let's shuttle down to where we want to be our new out point on this clip. So he does his neck stretch, he does a blow thing, he looks again at the target, and then he looks down. Okay, now he's pursing his lips and he's about ready to swing. We can tell he's got that determined look, and he's kind of going back, and we can see, yeah, he's going to swing. So let's take it right about there. I'm at 5 seconds and 16 frames. Let's mark that as our out point, but this time we're going to, rather than clicking this, it's up to you if you want, I'm going to click the O button on the keyboard, and that is our shortcut for setting the out point. Now this time, so you get practiced in doing lots of different tools and lots of different operations. Rather than doing our drag video thing, let's press the overwrite button. And it's okay, since we're at the very end of our sequence, we're not going to overwrite this any of the other clips. Because if we were not at the end, if say we were right here and we click the overwrite button, it's going to write over, as the term says, it'll write over this stuff. Let me go ahead and demonstrate that for you. See, it starts right there where the playhead was. We don't want that. Okay, so I'm going to undo, Command Z. And so now I'm going to go to the end of the sequence. In order to do anything here in the timeline, it has to be selected. Okay, so now it's selected, and I press the down arrow key, and it goes to the end, and it's after the last frame. So that's why the program monitor is now dark. Okay, so at this point, we have our out point. It's at 5 seconds and 16 frames, and we can press the overwrite button, and bang, there it is. Okay, but we've got that audio clip in there. We don't want that, so we can, like we did before, select the lock button and to lock the video. Then we can select the audio and then press delete, and then we can unlock the video track. So you have different tracks on here. We didn't talk about this yet. You start out with a default number of tracks, video tracks, so V1, video track 2, and video track 3. We're only going to use video track 1 in this tutorial. We'll also use audio track 1 for the sound effects, and then in some other tutorials that we're going to be doing, we'll be using additional video tracks as well as additional audio tracks, and we'll be mixing the audio. Okay, so at this point we have 3 clips now. I'm going to just scrub through those, and we can see he's repeating the neck stretch thing, and then he looks back down at the ball. And so we're back at the very beginning of where we started. I'm going to, since we're getting close to the end of our timeline here, I want to zoom it back a little bit so that we have more room downstream. Okay, and then I'm going to press the down arrow key since we're in the timeline to go to the very end of that clip. Now we're going to go back to the wide shot again and watch him swing. We're going to let him finally get around to swinging. Okay, so let's go into our project window and where our assets are, and we're going to click on the wide shot. That's this one right here. And then again, remember, you can scroll up and down to choose what you want. This is the sequence window, and so that shows you what your entire sequence consists of right now, and that's why it shows these multiple tracks here. So that's not the wide shot, and this is the wide shot, the MPEG-4. So let's double click on that, bring it into the source monitor, and let's click on the playhead to take it back to just before his backswing. Okay, so which is where we left off. So right about there. And actually we can even repeat a little bit of that, what we had there before. Let's select it right exactly at 15 seconds and 0 frames. And again, it's not 15 seconds from the beginning. This clip actually starts at 14:09. So you can set it at any place that you want. Let's go ahead and type it in. Let's take it mid-swing here, and then let's type in, since we know where we want to go with it, let's just select that, type in 15:00 on the keyboard, and enter, and it takes us exactly to where we want to be. So that'll be our in point. So let's click on Mark In, or you can press the I key, and then let's find our out point. Now we're going to do a little trick editing here, even on our very first exercise. Can you imagine that? So what we'll do is we'll have him backswing and swing through, and that'll be our out point right there, right after he swings up. And the club, you can see as we shuttle through the end of the club just touches his head. That'll be our out point. So we can click on the mark out, or you can press the O key on the keyboard, and there is our edit right there, from 1500 to 20 and 22 frames. And since we just want the video, let's drag video only down into the timeline and let it snap right into the end of our previous clip at the end of the sequence. And there we have it. Okay, so we've got wide shot, medium shot, close up, looking down, maintaining continuity. He swings, and now we're going to have him swing 2 more times in the 2 different shots, as I said before. But let's zoom back a little bit more again, go down to the slider, the timeline slider, and slide it back so we get a good view of what we're doing. And press the down arrow key to go to the end of that clip. And this time, let's bring in the close-up shot. So we're going to go from the wide shot to the close-up shot. Again, double-click on the close-up clip, bring it into the source monitor. We want to decide now where our endpoint is going to be. And since we're going to have him swinging 3 times, let's make our endpoint right at the point where he's going to come forward with his swing. So that's right about there, and that's 6 seconds and 29 frames. Press the I key on the keyboard. That'll be our endpoint. And let's drag video only into the timeline. It's going to be very short. These are going to be quick cuts. All right, now let's do the down arrow key to go to the end of the sequence, and let's double click the medium shot, and we're going to do something very similar to what we just did there. We're going to do just the swing. So press the I for your endpoint and drag it to the end. That'll be our out point. I'm at, okay, the endpoint was 11:16. Out point will be after he swings there. Let's make it 12:13. That'll be our out point. Press the O key, okie dokie, or you can click on mark out. Okay, and then this shows the length, the in-out duration, or the length of that edit, which is almost 1 second. So it's pretty quick cuts that we're doing there. Again, let's just drag video only down into the timeline. Okay, so we've got those quick cuts, and press the down arrow key to go to the end of that. And now let's go to the wide shot again and shuttle down to where we ended up. That was our out point. And you can find the exact out point by hitting the arrow key down. And then that'll be our new endpoint. We're going to pick up right from there on the wide shot. Press the I key. And then let's run the shuttle all the way down to right about there, where he's looking at where he hit the ball. I'm at 22. Let's take 22:05 here. That'll be our out point. Press the O key. Or you can press the mark out button. And then let's drag the video only down into the timeline. All right. So now we can shuttle through that on the timeline. We're going to just do one more edit, and that'll be the medium shot where he walks out of the shot. So arrow key down to get to the end of the timeline. And again, you make sure that you have the timeline selected before you press that arrow key, because otherwise it's going to go to the end of the source monitor, and that's not what you want to do. All right, so let's go back to the medium shot in our project window. Double click on that, and let's shuttle down to where we want to end up, and that is right about there. Okay, actually it's right about there. Well, we're going to end up at 12:14, which was our previous out point, and press the I button. That'll be our end point. And then we're just going to take it all the way to the end right before it cuts to black. So take it to 1408. Yeah, 1408. Press the O key and then drag the video only down to the end and let it snap into position. And we've got all our edits. So let's go ahead and watch this real time. And the shortcut, I mean, you can play it here by clicking on it. I like to use the space bar. That's quicker to do it that way. And just press the space bar and it'll play. Okay, so he hits it, and then we cut, and then he walks off. Now what we're going to do is give the scene an exterior establishing shot. And that's a standard convention that's done. If you've watched any sitcom or a television show or movies, they'll have an establishing shot so you know what town you're in. You know, sometimes it'll be a flyover, like over New York City if it takes place there, or it might be outside of a restaurant. Like if you watch Seinfeld, then you know they always show the zoom in on the exterior of the restaurant with the cars going by. That's an establishing shot. So we're going to give this golfer an establishing shot of the exterior of his house, and we're going to put it right at the very beginning before the wide shot of the interior. And I've taken the liberty of grabbing a house for you to use, and that's this one here. It's house-exterior. And you didn't see it there earlier in this tutorial because I just went and got it and put it in there. So, but it should be there in your golfer folder as part of your assets. And rather than doing it the other way where we did the file and import, I'm going to show you another way, and that's simply to drag and drop it into your project window. So select the house exterior JPEG and drag it into the project window, and you'll see that it has that little plus sign, and the hand icon for the cursor is got a little kind of fist grip sort of look, and then you release and you'll see it's importing the file, and there it is in our project window. Now double click it. Now the length defaults to 5 seconds. It says 429, but it's essentially 5 seconds long. And we're going to go ahead and drop that into the very beginning of the sequence. So click onto the sequence area and drag the playhead all the way over to the left. And again, a shortcut for doing that is to do the up arrow key until it gets to the very beginning. And now we're going to use this button for insert. Since we're at the very beginning of the sequence, it'll insert it at the very beginning, and it'll push all these other clips in our timeline, in our sequence, down by 5 seconds. So let's do that now. Okay, so insert, and there it is. Bang, right there. Now 5 seconds is a little bit long for establishing shot of this type. So what I want to do is shorten it down by 1 second, down to about 4 seconds. So there's this real simple way of doing that. There are a lot of different ways of doing that, but we're going to kind of eyeball it. So take your cursor and click and drag a selection box around all those clips, but not the house exterior clip. Okay? And then we're going to just click and drag anywhere on those selected clips and drag them left. Now you see that little window at the bottom underneath where it shows the amount of change in the negative that we're making. So we'll get it close. I'm gonna go drop it here at about 103 because that's the closest I can get to 1 second at this point. And now we've got about 4 seconds of the house exterior, and then it goes right into the interior. Okay, so now we have our establishing shot. But you know, you've seen establishing shots. You want to make it look like it's live video. And so we're going to do a little special effect here. And what we're actually doing is scaling it up. We're starting here at the default position, which shows the whole shot, the whole house and the gardens and the steps and the trees and everything. And we're going to zoom in on it and make it look like it's a live shot, like a camera sitting outside and zooming in on the house. And we don't have any cars going by, and we don't have any birds. Select the house exterior. In fact, you can double click it and it'll bring it into the source monitor. And we're going to go into the Effect Controls tab. So you see that right up here. You got the Source tab. Go into Effect Controls. So you click on this triangle to open it up, and you can see the data on the position and the scale. Okay, so the position is centered, and the center of this picture here, being that we're in 720 progressive, it's actually 720 pixels by 1280 pixels. The center of that is 640 by 360 right there. Okay, and it's at 100% of its size, so we can scale it up or scale it down. If we scale it down, then we're going to get a black envelope around it, so we don't want to do that, but we want to scale it up. So the way I did that right now, I just did it without telling you how I'm doing it, so I'm going to tell you how I did it. This is what's called a hot link, where it's blue like that. And any of these, you can click on them, and as you see, I mouse over it, and it changes from the arrowhead pointer to a little pointing hand with the index finger, and then you have the horizontal arrows going left and right. So when you click on that, then you can click and drag it, and it moves it in, zooming in or zooming out, depending on what you want to do. So again, we're going to want to zoom in, but we have to animate it. So in animation, you have what are called keyframes. And keyframes comes from animation, from traditional animation, where the lead animator would draw one picture of, say, Mickey Mouse standing in a position like he's at rest, and then he'll have another position where he's getting ready to walk, and he's got his left leg forward and his right arm forward, and then he'll be cycling through the walk cycle, and then he'll have his left arm forward and his right leg forward. Those are called keyframes. So you have one keyframe where he's standing at rest, the second keyframe where he's got his right arm forward and his left leg forward, and the opposite, moving opposite arms and legs, and then the next one where he's got his left arm forward and his right leg forward. That would be keyframe 3. So we have the principle is taken into animating in 2D animation and 3D animation, and even animating graphics and stills and video in an editing program. So that's what we're going to do right now. And if you look over here on the left, you've got these little stopwatches, and you can see it says toggle animation. And when we click on those, it creates what we call a keyframe. Again, just like in regular traditional animation. So what we're going to want to do both. We're going to want to change the position in time, and then we're going to also want to scale it to give it that effect of zooming in on the house. And what I want to do is zoom in like we're zooming in to the door, towards the door, like the door is going to be the center. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to, and make sure we're at the very beginning of that still in the timeline. Okay, we're going to call it a clip now because it is moving in time. All right, so again, make sure you're at the very beginning and click on the scale toggle animation stopwatch and the position animation. So you can see now that they're blue, they're selected. And look over here, you see we now have the add remove keyframe. Those indicate that there's a keyframe and that we're right on that in the timeline. And here are the keyframes. Now we only see part of it. We only see the right half of it, of this diamond, and that's what it's a diamond shape, because we're right in the middle of that on the timeline. So we can add and remove it by clicking on either of these, but since we want them selected and we want them there. Okay, and that sets this still as a clip in the timeline to move starting at that position. Now we're going to move it over time in about what we have 4 seconds that we pretty much settled on, not exactly 4 seconds, but close to it. And we're going to go to the last frame. So go down here into the timeline and let's take it to right about the last frame. So you can move the playhead there, and let's also zoom in on that so we can see it a little bit tighter. Now I want to show you another way too. Remember that you can use the arrow key if you want to get more precise, and we can get fairly precise here, but suppose we just are tired of using our mouse. We can use the arrow key and arrow down, and that'll take us to the first frame of the next clip, and then just press the left arrow back 1. Now we know we're at the very last frame of that still. This is where we add our animation. Okay, so let's go back up into the Effect Controls tab, and we can simply animate it by clicking on this hot link where it says 100. Click on it and drag it to the right, and you can see over in the program monitor that it's zooming in. Okay, so let's leave it right at 150. That's 50% larger. And we're also going to move it. Remember I said we wanted to animate it so it looks like we're panning right with a camera. But what you need to do is, if we're panning right, then what we do is move the image to the left. And the way we do that, again, we have these hot links here. This is our left and right position. This is our up and down position. We want to move it to the left. So we're going to click on it and move it to the left. And you can see the numbers change. So we're moving over towards 0 in the X position. So if you remember from your Cartesian coordinates in math that you've got X, and X is left to right and Y is up and down. See, you thought you'd never use that, but here you are in video editing and you're using your Cartesian coordinates. So that's what these are, left and right and up and down, and each one of these represents a pixel. Okay, so you can also move it up and down. Let's move it up a little bit by clicking and dragging to the left. Let's leave it right at 275. And again, like we had with those other ones in the timeline, and you can type these in too. So say we want to type 100, and what happens? Oh, it moves way down. So, but we don't want that. We want it to be right at 250. Okay, and that's a good place. And notice that when we do that, when we make those changes, it automatically extrapolates that information and creates a keyframe there, so that when we move it through the timeline, that it automatically gives us an animation. So click on your playhead and drag it through the timeline, and there's your animation. It's moving, it's panning to the right and while zooming in at the same time on the house. And now you've got your very first animation. So let's play through this real time and take a look at it. Press your space bar, or you can also click right here. So there you go, a complete edit. And what I'm doing is I'm pressing the up arrow key to go through each clip. And a quick way to do that is you can press on the FN key if you're on a MacBook Pro, and you can just hold that down while pressing the left arrow button, and that'll take you to the home. It's really another optional or function key to give another function to the arrow keys. And in this case, the left arrow brings you home. And now that we've got a complete edited sequence here, we want to add a couple of effects. First of all, let's do a fade in from black and a fade out to black from the video, and then I'm also going to want to do a dissolve. A lot of times in an establishing shot, you'll do a dissolve after you zoom in. We could leave it as a cut, and a cut is fine, but we'll go ahead and add an effect to make it a little interesting. Okay, so over here you see that double arrow there, kind of like a chevron. Click on that and that'll take us into the effects. If we mouse over here and select it and drag, and we can move it out and we can see our effects tab easier. But if it's shrunk down like that to give us more room for the tools or for the timeline, then we need to click on that to go to whichever one of those tabs that we need. Okay, but we're going to go into the effects tab, and we want to do video transition. So we go to the video transition folder, open that up, and what we're going to be doing is a dissolve. Even though it's a fade in from black, technically it's a cross dissolve. So you can see that it automatically defaults to the selecting of the cross dissolve because it's the most commonly used, and that's what we're going to do. And the way this works is you click on it and drag it over onto the timeline and onto the clip that you're going to be using the effect on. And it's a transition, a video transition, and specifically a cross dissolve. And it's being used as a cross dissolve from black to video, and in this case onto the still. And so that'll be our fade in, and then we're going to do a fade out too. So we do the same thing, click on the cross dissolve in the effects tab and take it to the very end, drag it to the very end, and so that it's going to fade out at the end. All right, and one more thing we want to do is cross dissolve, as I said, between the zoom in on the house and the interior. So one more time, let's click on the cross dissolve, drag it, and we're going to drop it right on top of the edge here. But that's a little bit short. We do have such a short clip there, and then it cuts right to that. So that being so short, I want to make that transition half a second instead of a second. All the transitions default to 1 second in length, so I want to shorten that. And the quick way to do that is, let's zoom in on that. Press the Z key and click on that a couple of times till we can see it really well, and then press the V key for our select tool, or again you can select it either of those in the tool set here, the toolbox, and mouse over to the very edge of that cross dissolve effect here, and you'll see then you get sort of a red bracket, the icon there of the cross dissolve effect, and just drag it to the left so it's about half as long. Now that'd be about half a second, and as you see, when we did that, it changed the duration. You can see the change in the duration in that little window. And now it won't cut from that wide shot so quickly before it goes to the medium shot. We don't want it to cut so quick. So I'm going to play that through that, take a look at it in real time, and then that's not so bad. Let's play just those effects that we just did. So take it to the very beginning. You can do the FN key and the left arrow to take it to the very beginning, or you can just drag it to the very beginning and then press the space bar to play. So we fade in to our animated zoom in, and then it cross dissolves to the interior shot and then cuts through. And then let's go quickly to the end and watch it fade out. So it fades out as he's walking off the scene. Okay, so press the FN key. Again, if you're on a Mac, if you're not, you can press the home key on either Windows or a Mac Pro or whatever you're using. And that'll take us to the very beginning. Now we're at the point where we can add the sound effects. And that can be a whole lot of fun. Remember, we've got in our project window, go ahead and click on that chevron again. Let's go to the project window, and that has our assets. And let's mouse over this to make it a little more accessible to our assets window. And then there is our sound effects bin. Okay, remember, it's a folder when it's outside, but when it's inside an editing program, it's called a bin. So let's double click on that, and that brings it back up. And we can see these waveform icons indicate that it's strictly a waveform and it's an audio file. It's not, there's no video attached to it. So let's play through several of these and listen to what they sound like. Here's the clothes. Pressing the space bar. So that's just clothes ruffling as he's maybe moving around or doing his neck thing that he does. There's another clothes sound effect. It's a little exaggerated. Okay, and we've got footsteps, hard footsteps it says. So that can be just kind of moving his foot around, and then that can be when he's walking off. So we got plenty of walking sound effect there for when he's walking off. Then we have the golf hit, which we only have one of those, and that's just a whoosh. There you go. But we'll need that 3 times because we have him swinging and hitting the ball 3 times. Groan. So that can be while he's craning his neck around and stretching his neck. That's a little exaggerated, probably a lot more than we will need for this. But you can pick, or you can just not use it at all. I mean, that's our choice. Well, we'll probably use it just for the practice. And then open window. What that does is gives you an ambient sound, maybe some sound coming from outside. And then smash glass. So his wife's going to be pretty upset when she hears this, if she's anywhere in the house. And he's going to probably have to run for his life. But we're going to have that happen after he swings and hits his target. We'll assume it's an accident. And then we have suburban park. And so we have birds in the distance chirping, and we have birds in the very near vicinity chirping. And you can see from the waveform, the amplitude rises with the birds in the near vicinity chirping. So we use a little bit of that on the exterior when we're outside, and then we'll bring it way down underneath when we go inside. Okay, so press the space bar and stop there. Listen to those and add them at your discretion. I'm going to do it a certain way. You can do it exactly the way I want, or you can play around with it. I do encourage you to play around and experiment. You don't have to do it exactly the way I do it. It might be best to do a couple of the things with me and then just kind of go off on your own and play around. And that goes with the video too. You don't have to do exactly the way I do it. It's good to do it at first that way, and then you can play around with it and experiment and try doing different cuts at different times and with different shots. And really one of the best ways to learn. We're going to go kind of linear from the very beginning with the exterior and the birds on the outside. So I'm going to minimize this. Let's press the yellow button there and let it go down into the dock. And we'll take a little bit of this audio, run the playhead back to the beginning, and start off, I think right at the beginning is good. So that'll be our in point, and it automatically chooses an in point there. You don't have to press the I key or press the in point mark in, because it'll do that automatically. And then choose an out point. Now our entire clip, let me stretch this out a little bit, is only barely over 24. It's 24 seconds and 5 frames, and that includes the fade in and fade out. We can put the bird sound all the way through the whole thing, but this sound effect is over 2.5 minutes long, so we certainly don't need that much. We can just get it close by dragging this. We have 2405. Let's go ahead and type that in, 2405. And make it exactly the same length as the edited sequence that we have. And now you notice, remember we talked about the drag video only, but we don't have any video here, but we do have audio, so drag audio only. Let's go ahead and drag that down in there once we get our out point set 2405, but we need to set that as our out point. So press the O key, or you can mark out. And then let's drag audio only down into the timeline, and you can see there it is. It's exactly the same length as the edited sequence. And mouse over it and drag it down right here at the edge so you can see your waveforms. Those are the birds chirping in the distance and in the near place. But I can see here as we go through there that I want to have the loud birds, the near vicinity birds chirping on the outside before we come on the inside. So let's trim down this audio clip and move these over to the outside so that we hear them before we come inside. And the way we do that is, a real quick way is mouse over to the beginning here till you get that red bracket, and that's for trimming off. We can trim it down about 2.5 seconds or so, 2:15. Then simply select it and drag it to the left. Okay, and that gives us our sound before we transition to the inside. That looks good. I like that. Okay, but then we've got this noise, and we don't want it that loud inside because we moved inside, and the sound should not be as loud. So we're going to get to that in a little bit. And now we can move this and trim it back out to the same length, and it'll snap into position with the end of the video clip. Now, one of the things I neglected to say that in order to trim these out, you have to click on it. And you mouse over the end of something like this, and then you have to click and drag it in order to do that. You probably figured that out, but just to be on the safe side, I want to make sure that you understand that you have to click and drag in order to move those things. And it's the same for the transitions. Click and drag to change the distance and the length, and same with this one here. So click and drag. Now let's go on to the fade down of the audio, and this would also be for the fade up. We want to, after we transition to the interior, we want the background noise to be lower than it is outside. And so in order to do that, we need to fade it down. And we're going to do something, well, the effect is similar to the animation. We're going to use keyframes, only these keyframes are audio keyframes. And the way that's done is, now look, notice how when I mouse over the central line between, this is a stereo file, so you've got a left channel and a right channel. And they're slightly different because it was recorded in stereo, so the different directions or positions that the microphones might have been facing or being directed made the sound come in a little bit different. So you can see some slight differences in the waveform because of that. Now, we're going to fade down both channels at the same time. And again, look, see when I mouse over the center line, which is the level, that's at 0 dB. And if you see the little balloon that comes up, it says 0 dB on the volume level over on the right there. We're going to change that. We're going to start at 0, and then we're going to fade it down over about half a second. So when you see that icon, the hollow arrowhead with the vertical lines up and down, then hold down the command key, and then you see it's plus. You get a little plus there, and that means you can add a keyframe. So when you click on the line there, that's the volume level line, the icon changes to a little wedge, and you get a keyframe, a little diamond there. Okay? So you can release the command key after you get that, and then just go down about half a second or so, about the same length as our transition that we made, and mouse over it again, and then hold down the command key again, and then click, and then release the command key. Now, continue to hold onto that keyframe, and then just drag it down. And you'll see there in your little balloon, there how the dB level changes up and down depending on where you're at. You can raise it up, and right now it's at 4.28 decibels, and you can drag it down, and right now it's at minus 7.86 decibels. And that's a pretty good spot right about there. And then let's go ahead and release. Like I said, that'll bring the volume down, and especially when it comes to these sounds of the birds there. So I'm going to play that right about from here, and we'll listen to it. And that's still pretty loud. Let's compare it to this one, which is fine. But then when it gets to here, that's lower, but that's still louder than I would like it. So what I'm going to do is let's add another one at that point, because I like having some of the sound there as if the window's open, but it's still at a lower level. So when we get to this point right here, let's bring it down even lower. So again, mouse over it till you get those lines, those arrows. Hold down the command key, click, and you'll get that keyframe. Then let's go down another half second or so, and mouse over that, hold down the command key, and click again. Then release the Command key, then click on that keyframe and then drag it down. This is called kind of a rubber band, is one of the slang terms for it, because you can stretch it around kind of like you would a rubber band and move it around in different places in the timeline as long as you're holding it down. So let's take it down to minus 14.35 dB, and that should be about where we want it. Let's play. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then the other one will be the same. Okay. And actually, we're going to have some sound coming on top of that as well, actually below it, physically, below it here in the timeline. Now let's mouse over this area to the left of that audio clip until you get those horizontal lines, and click and then drag it up. And we're going to make it a little bit smaller, but we still want to be able to see it. And hold down the FN key and the arrow to take it home, or press the home key on your keyboard. Or again, you can drag the playhead all the way to the beginning. We're going to lay down some more sound effects too, but let's just play this a little bit, get an idea here. Okay, that's loud outside, and then it's much lower on the inside. Okay, so let's look in our little bag of audio sound effect tricks and see what else we have. Okay, we have his clothes that can be ruffling a little bit. We have footsteps, remember, and the sneakers. And we have the golf hit. Let's go ahead and lay down the golf hit. I think that's a good place to go at this point. So double click on that, and then click on the yellow dot there to minimize it. Send it back down into the dock. And let's run the playhead. This is a very short clip. It's only 22 frames long, less than a second. And so let's click on the playhead and let's take it to right as this. This is one frame. This represents a single frame in the audio. And let's have it just where it's touching the very first part of that sound effect and the waveform. That'll be our in point. So press the I button, or else click on the mark in. And then let's move it to the out point. That'll be after the waveform is down, faded down on that golf hit. And let's press the O key, or we can click on the mark out button. Okay, so now we have our edit is set, and it's only 9 frames long, as you can see there. And we're going to drag that down into the timeline. Okay, so let's scrub here until we get to the point right where that ball is going to be hit the first time. Okay, and then we got 2 and 3. Okay, so let's take it again right to where it hits the first time, and that's right there. Okay, and if you want, you can arrow forward and back to get that spot. You got a little motion blur there, but that's right where it hits, right there. So that's where we want our golf hit sound effect to land, and that'll be the in point. Go back up into the source window, mouse over the drag audio only icon, click on that, and then drag it down into the audio 2, the track 2 timeline, and release. Okay, so let's zoom in on that so we can see it a little more clearly, and we'll also expand it. So let's expand it here so we can see the waveform, and let's also zoom in. So press the Z key, or else click on the zoom tool, and then click on it, and that zooms us in so we can see the waveform. So we're going to have 3 of those, remember, and that's the first one. So let's play it and listen to it. Okay, so there's your first one. And then we're going to have a second one right before that. So let's say right about there. Since he's looking straight down at it, we'll assume that he's watching the ball, keeping his eye on the ball. And we're going to put another one right there. So we can copy and paste it from the original, or we can just drag the original down. So let's do that again. Let's drag audio only. again, drag it down and drop it right exactly where we are in the timeline. So there you have another one. Okay, and let's press the V key again so we get the select tool again, or you can click on the select tool. And let's slide the timeline slider down a little bit so we can see all these in our view. And let's run down again to where the next hit would be, which would be right about there. So you can use the arrow right and left key to find it. I'd say that's the one right at that point, which is 20 seconds and 6 frames. And let's try the copy and paste this time. Just like in a graphics program, you can copy and paste it, but the trick is here that we have to have the track targeted in order to do that. So we want to target A2 for our paste. But first of all, we have to untarget the first track. And so that the target will lay down here on track 2. So we got, click on that, Command C for copy, and then we already have the playhead in position, then Command V for paste. And it pastes it right into where we want it. So let's play just that little part of the sequence. Okay, so it's synced right with the action, and that's the way we want it. And don't forget to save on a regular basis. I haven't reminded you to do that, but that's done by holding down the Command and the S key simultaneously, and then you save it. So because sometimes computers crash, whoa, surprise, surprise, but it does happen, and you don't want to lose that work. All right, so now we have our 2 different sound effects. We have the background sound effect with the birds, and we have the golf hits. And let's look in our little bag of goodies again, and let's try. Okay, this is fun to have. The smash. We got to have the crashing of the Ming Dynasty vase that his wife paid thousands of dollars for. Hundreds of thousands of dollars for. So let's take that to the very first frame, frame 1. That'll be our in point. Mark in. Okay, and then our out point, let's drag the playhead to the very end of it and mark out. Press the out, the O key, or press the mark out button. And we're going to find out where we're going to put that. So that's going to be after the last hit, even though we can assume that it's crashed, but we also have the other hits, so we're going to let it crash after the last hit. So let's zoom in on that. Press the Z key and zoom in. And let's find a good spot. We'll just kind of use our visceral sensibilities on this and what would be the crash. And how about right about there? Let's just assume that after he's finished with his swing, crash right about where we cut. I think that's perfect. When we cut to that last wide shot. Let's drag that down there. So audio only. And again, we can either do it that way or we can do an overwrite. Since we have that track targeted now, we can do the overwrite. And there it is. Okay, so let's play just through that sequence. Yeah, he's in trouble. Okay, so let's add one more sound effect together, and then you can play around if you want with some of the other, like the groan or the clothes, the ruffling of the clothes. What I want to do is add the footsteps at the end where he's walking off, and then we'll minimize that. So, okay, I double-clicked it, and now here it is in the preview monitor, and let's play it. So we'll just assume that's him walking off. We don't need very much of it because he just walks off really quickly. So let's take the first few of those. I'm not sure exactly how long it is. It's probably only a couple of seconds. And press the O button. All right, and then let's zoom this out. Remember, click on that and you can drag it out to zoom out, and then let's click on the middle of the slider and slide it to the end there, And we're going to put this on the second track. We could, if we wanted to, put it on the third track, but since we have room after the crash for when he's walking off, we'll just put it in right after the crash. So you can see I've still got a zoom in tool. Press the V key, or again, we can click on the select tool there, and let's bring that down to where he's just walking off. So that's where he just takes his first step. You can see his left leg there stepping forward, and we'll probably only have time for maybe 1 or 2 steps really. So let's see how that goes. So we've got our endpoint there, and I'm right at about 2301. So let's go up here to the drag audio only, drag that down into the timeline. You can see that goes way more than we really need. And let's mouse over to the end there of the audio file, click, and then drag it to the end. So yeah, we'll just do a couple quick steps as he's walking off. And let's play it from there. It's going to be too loud, but then we'll bring it down. So we got 2 steps in there, and that's about it. Sounds like for as nice a house as that is, that's a pretty creaky floorboard he's got. But we'll fade it out from there. So let's zoom in, and we'll fade the audio out as we're fading the video out. And the video, of course, we already have the fade in there, the cross dissolve to black, the fade to black. So let's zoom in on this. We can just slide the slider there and zoom in, and then let's fade the audio down. So remember, we mouse over here where we're going to start the fade before the second footstep comes in, and hold down the command key, click on it, and then we'll end the fade right at the very end. And then so holding down the command key still, let's click again right there. Then we have the keyframe here. Let's click on that and then drag it down, and that'll complete our fade. So let's listen to that. Okay, so a couple steps and he's off. So that's pretty much it. If you want, you can go in and, like I said earlier, play around with the sound effects, add some of the shirt ruffling where he's doing his neck thing, or even add a groan like that if you want. It might sound kind of funny and amaze your friends and family. Well, let's go ahead and play through it and see if everything looks good. All right, so yeah, that's looking pretty good. And you could also add music to this if you want on track number 3. I'm not going to do that now, but if you want to play around with it and get a little ahead of the game, we are going to be using music, a pre-produced music track in day 2. So if you want to wait till then, that's fine as well, and we'll get a little practice with that. Now that we have our edited sequence complete, we need to export it. And so it can be played by anybody on their computer, or it can be added to a DVD, or it can be uploaded to your favorite streaming site like YouTube or Vimeo, or it can be sent across the internet to a friend, emailed, whatever. But anyway, it'll be a self-contained video file that can be used over a whole host of applications. So this is how the export is done. Go up to File, and go to the drop down, go down here where it says Export Media, and as you can see, the shortcut for that is Command M, and that goes into the Export Settings dialog box. And in this window you can preview what the total video is through the total length. And you can decide how much of it you want to export. If you've got just a work area set, or you want the entire sequence, or just sequence in and out. In this case, it'll be both. Both the entire sequence and the sequence in and out will be the same. So we'll just leave it set at the default, which is sequence in out. Again, this is just for your preview. It doesn't matter where you set this. All right, now let's look up here on the upper right on the export settings. If you want to match the sequence settings, you can set that, but we're going to make sure that you're on the same page as I am here. This has the settings that I used in the last time that I exported something. So if yours doesn't say H.264 for the format, then you need to select that. Okay? There are a lot of different choices, and it can be very confusing as you're first starting out. But we want to keep it as simple, as I said, as possible. So you click this drop down, and you have a lot of different choices. Some are just audio, some are just stills, like sequences of stills. You can choose QuickTime, but we're going to go with H.264, and that is the state-of-the-art compression. That's the setting for the highest quality video, and along with the lowest size file, which is very, very important for doing this kind of work. So make sure it's H.264, okay? And you can say match, you can leave it there, the match source high bit rate. That's fine because that'll be a good quality. There are all kinds of other settings that you can choose. Ours is pretty much the same as this one here, the YouTube 720p in HD. That's fine, but make sure that it's one of those that it's 720p. And again, that's not too critical at this point. We'll just leave it at match source. Okay? Now, you don't need, if you want to put comments in, you can, that's fine. We don't need to do that now. The way the output name defaults, it defaults to the name of the first video that you put into the timeline in the sequence, which was, in our case, wide1.mpeg4. But go ahead and click on that. It's a link, and that will send us to where we want to save it. So you want to save it into the folder where you're working. That's the golfer folder. Okay, and let's rename it. It says save as. Let's rename that to golfer. And if you want, you can add final to it in case you have different versions of this. So let's go ahead and name that golfer final.mpeg4. And the MPEG-4 is the compression that the H.264 uses. Okay? And let's export that by hitting save down here. Save. All right? And then that targets that folder for the export of the video. And only one more thing we need to do is check to make sure that everything is the way we want it. We have our name. We're exporting both video and audio. Okay, and then this shows kind of a reiteration of what the output setting is. You have your path right here, and you have the size. It's 16 by 9 aspect ratio, which is in this case 1280 by 720. It's a wide screen, and it's 29.97, which 30 frames a second really. That's what FPS stands for, frames per second. I'll explain what this is later on in our lecture. Okay, and that's the length, as we've seen before, 24 seconds and 5 frames, 48 kilohertz, high quality stereo. And down here, we can see these are all, it's just a reiteration of all those things that we just talked about up here, the same stuff. And you can check these things. You can leave those the way they are right now and go down here, and we're going to click on export, and that'll go ahead and output. You can see the progress bar here, and since it's such a small video, it is going to export very fast. It renders the video and then exports it into that folder. And it's done. So let's navigate through the Finder to that folder. There we are. And there it is, Golfer Final. So we can review that by double-clicking it, or you can click on it and do Command O for open. And there it is, and let's play it. And we're done. And so now you can take that video and you can upload it to YouTube or some other streaming site and social media. If you want to upload it to Facebook, say, wow, this is my first video edit project. And you will absolutely amaze all your friends and family, and they'll think rightly so that you are an amazing person with amazing skills.